Well, good morning, everybody. Let's see if we can get this show rolling. I'll get this. I got it. There we go. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and you've never had a better time. But if you'd like to take this experience up to levels that nobody can even understand with their tiny, shiny human brains, all you need for that is a cup or a mug or a glass, a tankard, chalice, a stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. I'm slurring my voice, am I not? Yeah, there's definitely something wrong with my mouth. But anyway, join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine of the day thing that makes everything better. It's called the simultaneous sip, and it happens now. Go. All right, well, apparently in Austin, there are already driverless Teslas. So if you're walking around in Austin, you're going to see these driverless cars go by. Not only are there driverless cars now, which is really good if you don't like people, but MIT has developed a ping pong playing robot, which is better than all the other ping pong playing robots, I guess, because we've done this before. But I'm trying to think of a future life where I get an Uber, but there's no Uber driver, so I don't have to worry about a person. And then I take it to my local ping pong emporium, and I play with the robot. And then I take my self-driving auto cab home. I can avoid people completely. That's a good world. Well, as you know, the New York Times did a big piece alleging that Elon Musk is taking all kinds of drugs. They say it was on ketamine and ecstasy and mushrooms. And Elon Musk says, nope, he's not on any drugs at all. It's fake news. And he was randomly tested for 3 years after he had one puff of weed on the Joe Rogan show. So nope, he's telling us quite clearly that he is not on any kinds of drugs. And I think they do keep testing him because of SpaceX. He did say he tried prescription ketamine a few years ago, and but that wasn't illegal. So here's something exciting and interesting engineering. I keep telling you that the most exciting technology would be holes. Like the boring company can make a tunnel, big hole. But if you could go straight down and you could go far enough, you could get into all that geothermal. And apparently there's a new technology that looks like it can do that. And it's a company called Quaise Energy. And what do? They have a novel drilling method. They use a gyrotron, which is how I do it. It's a device that generates a powerful high-frequency millimeter wave. And these waves are so intense that they can literally vaporize rock, functioning like a microwave on steroids to bore deep into the earth. Well, if that works, the energy situation on Earth is really going to change, because presumably, if they can make one drill that can do that, They can make lots of drills that can do that. So imagine having unlimited free energy. Free meaning, it might cost you $20 to $40 million to drill the hole. But once you did, it would be free energy for just about ever. Well, Paris is probably on fire still because the French soccer team won a big victory. What team is it? The Paris Saint-Germain's PSG. I watched that match. Oh my goodness, that was fun. That was such a good match. It was 4-0 or 5-0, but it was incredible. And what do you do when your team wins? Well, apparently, if you've got a big immigrant population, uh, and people have nothing else to do, they burn their own city. So don't go to Paris when Paris is winning. JP Morgan Chase's CEO, Jamie Dimon, he was at the Reagan National Economic Forum. And when somebody asked him about stockpiling Bitcoin, he said, we shouldn't be stockpiling Bitcoin. The US government should be stockpiling guns, ammunition, and drones. Does Jamie Dimon know something we don't know? Well, he does know that if we ever got into a real missile fight with, a major enemy, we would be out of missiles in about, a week? So he does know that our military-industrial complex has not been doing the job, or maybe we gave too much of it to Ukraine or something. But we don't really have enough stuff to have a proper war. Part of me thinks that's good news, because if we had all the weapons we needed and all the ammunition we needed, don't you think we'd be a little bit more likely to want to start a war? I like the fact that we don't. Anyway, and Dimon also says we should be stockpiling rare earth if we could get it. He also doesn't like immigration. So Jamie Dimon said, immigration, what the hell were we doing? The bottom 20% of our population, their wages didn't go up for 20 years. They're dying 7 years younger. Their schools don't work. Americans are getting sick of it. And then he blames Democrats for all of their, what he calls the blue tape instead of the red tape, because he says the Democrats are the ones that like all the regulations that kill business. So he's pretty close to a Republican, but not there yet. We'll keep watching. Well, Joe Rogan had rock star Bono on his show, and Bono thinks that the funding cuts to USAID have already killed 300,000 people. How many of you think that the funding cuts to USAID have killed 300,000 people? I hope not, but that sounds a little bit ridiculous. I'm not even going to fact check that. But Rogan tried to correct him and tell him that USAID was more of a money laundering operation than anything else. And said that billions of dollars are missing, and that Elon Musk said if any of this had been done by a public company, the company would be delisted and the executives would be in jail. And then Musk called Bono a retard. And apparently, retard is now just an acceptable word. Not with everybody, of course. Well, PBS, according to the AP, PBS is going to sue the Trump administration over their defunding same as NPR. Now, how in the world can people always find a reason to sue? You would think that sometimes it would just be shit they don't like, but there wouldn't be anything you could sue over. So apparently, the lawsuit relies on the argument that they're being defunded because of their opinions, because they're a little bit too liberal. Now, does the government need a reason? So what if that is the reason? Who cares? So anyway, I'm just amazed that you can sue over anything. You know, there should be a whole different kind of government where there's like a court that follows the president around. And as soon as the president signs an executive order, the court says, well, anybody suing us? All right, you are. All right, we'll make a judgment now. We're going to override you. But holy cow, how can it be true that everybody can sue everybody about everything in the government anyway? Anyway, don't you wonder what the legal budget is for the government? How much do you think the Trump administration spends on lawyers? It's got to be $1 billion, like maybe $1 billion just on lawsuits. I mean, it's going to be a crazy number. I don't know. Well, allegedly, there's, according to Newsmax, there might be some kind of geostorm today. The sun might have some kind of weird effect that could affect our electronics. How many times have we heard that? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that the sun is exploding and your internet's going to go out. But it seems like it never does. Am I jinxing it? Are we really bad at predicting sunspots and what they will do? I'm not going to worry about that one. Well, Trump has done the most Trumpian thing I've ever heard in my life. You know how Trump likes the show? You know, it doesn't matter if it's technically accurate sometimes. He likes to put on a show. And apparently he truthed, so he sent out a message on Truth, that Joe Biden was murdered in 2020 and replaced with a clone that has different eye color. And he really did that. That's a real thing that happened in the real world. Now, if it were Monday, and probably it'll happen Monday, the Democrats will go crazy. It's like, my God, now he's spreading the rumor that Joe Biden's a clone. And I'm thinking to myself, there were a lot of Republicans who thought Joe Biden was a clone. There's at least one Joe Biden that was too tall, and we all saw that one. But that was just probably just a body double. But do you think there's a Joe Biden clone with a different eye color? How many of you think that Joe Biden died and he's now a clone? Well, the best argument against it is, why would you build a clone that was also incompetent? If you wanted to clone him, you'd clone him with somebody who could walk and talk. You wouldn't clone him with somebody who was just as deeply cognitively impaired as the original. So I'm going to say no on that, but it's funny that Trump would post that. There's a Secret Service whistleblower, according to Senator Josh Hawley, who is saying, this is in the New York Post, and the Secret Service whistleblower claims that former President Biden was so out of it at the White House that he would, quote, get lost in his closet. Now, I think I may have predicted some time ago that the stories about Biden would start out being a little bit mild, and then they would just get worse and worse and worse until you just couldn't even believe it. Well, here it comes. Here it comes. He would get lost in his own closet. Okay, you want some more? Apparently, journalist Olivia Nuzzi was going to have a show on Bloomberg, but her show got canceled at the last minute because she wrote an article questioning Biden's health and suggesting there was a cover-up. And her show got canceled. She got punished. So the Daily Mail is writing about that. So allegedly, Bloomberg literally punished her for having an accurate story about Biden. Now, do you understand why nobody can talk about it? It's because the Democrats would punish you if you talked about it. Anyway, is the same thing happening on the Republican side? If someone had some damning story about Trump, would that get your shows all canceled? And maybe, I don't know. But that's pretty bad. And then Byron Donald on Fox News is talking about the fact that I think there might be some resistance as Congress is trying to get Biden's doctor to testify. He says, we need to issue subpoenas immediately for the White House doctor under Joe Biden and for some of his key staffers. Now, how much do you think we'll find out if his doctor actually testifies in Congress? Do you think the doctor will tell the full truth and nothing but the truth? Or is it possible that the doctor will weasel things like, well, I didn't see any problem when I talked to him, blah, 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 blah. I feel like it'll be more like that because the doctor has to protect his own reputation. Meanwhile, there was an MIT class president giving a speech at graduation and ended up getting real political and said, quote, we were watching Israel try to wipe Palestine off the face of the earth. And it's a shame that MIT is part of it. And I guess people walked out and it became a big deal. She submitted a fake speech that was approved before she read her real speech, which is a trick I hear that sometimes people do. Submit a fake speech before they read the real one. Anyway, here's the weirdest headline. Apparently, China considers Harvard a party school. Isn't that funny? That Harvard is the top party school for the Chinese. Now, I don't have much to say about that, but usually in California, when we're talking about the top party school, it's something like Chico State. It's not the one of the top Ivy Leagues, but it's kind of insulting. Oh, your best college? We call it a party school. Really? Is it that easy for you? Yeah, the top party school outside of China. Is that real? How many of you think that the Chinese actually think of Harvard as a top party school? Does that seem likely? I'm going to say maybe not. Maybe not. Well, according to Redfin, they help you sell your house. There are nearly 500,000 more people selling homes than buying them right now. And the 6 of the top 10 buyers markets are in Florida. So I guess all those people who moved to Florida during the pandemic have decided that a few years of humidity, and they're like, I'm out of here. How many of you could handle the humidity in Florida? If you spent time there, you know what I'm talking about. Like in California, we basically don't have humidity. It could be super hot and you don't want to go into it, but we don't really have humidity. But Florida, oh my God, it's hard to walk just to the car. So I think a lot of people said to themselves, hey, I like all this freedom and republicanism, so I'll move to Florida. And then they found out that half of the year you want to kill yourself when you walk outside. Anyway, Trump said he's increasing the steel tariffs from 25% to 50%. And has it been blocked by an activist judge yet? I'm completely lost. So we've got hundreds of countries, and then within each country, there are dozens of key products. And then we've had different proposed tariffs on each of them, which first were high and maybe they got pulled back or they got delayed. So every time I read a story like this, like steel tariffs go from this to that, I don't know what is real. Has it already been blocked by an activist judge? And if it's been blocked by the activist judge, has the Supreme Court already overruled it, or will they? It's impossible to just follow the story about what's happening with tariffs. So I feel like that's good for the stock market, because the stock market can't be sure it's bad because nobody knows what it is. It's just sort of confusing. And then it gets boring. If it's boring and confusing, then the market can adjust to it. So maybe that's what's happening. Well, according to CNN, the latest inflation numbers are almost exactly where the Fed would want them, 2.1%. The Fed would like it to be 2%. And that's a 7-month low. And it's basically, like I said, right where the Fed would want it. Now, that's CNN. So far, employment looks good. And then I think there was also, the next story is, according to the Daily Wire and NBC, personal incomes increased by 0.8% in April, well ahead of the forecasted 0.3%. CNBC is talking about that. So employment looks pretty good. The stock market looks pretty good. Inflation looks pretty good. Energy prices are coming down. And personal incomes have risen more than we thought. At the same time that we're in the middle of this tariff chaos, how could any of this be true? Even I thought that the tariff stuff would at least temporarily knock things down, and might still, because the tariffs are still a little bit more in our future than in our past. But things sure aren't going well for all that chaos. Anyway, Larry Fink of BlackRock, he says the next big thing in financial assets are that all of your financial assets will be tokenized. That means every stock, every bond, every financial instrument will be on one general ledger. Now, tokenized means something like a crypto or a Bitcoin, so that everybody would have public access to look at the ledger, I guess, much like Bitcoin. Now, does that make sense? It seems like it would maybe make banks unnecessary or something. Once you had all your ledger and all your money was in some kind of public thing that everybody could see and everybody would have access to, doesn't that mean that anybody could lend money and anybody could borrow it and you could charge interest to anybody you wanted? And I feel like banks The only thing that's keeping banks in business is that they have lobbyists. It seems like the technology has already gotten to the point where a traditional bank doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, think about the fact that you have more than one checking account, where you've got one savings account and one checking account. Wouldn't it make more sense if when you have money in the bank, they pay you interest, and when you borrow from them, you pay them interest? It just seems like there's a way easier way to do banking. So anyway, yeah, I told you that the claims about Biden are just going to get worse and worse. Here's another one. So Jake Tapper, as you know, has his book out, Original Sin, and his new claim is that I think he said this on Bill Maher's show, that Biden's mental deterioration led to the crisis at the border. And Tapper said, you're complimenting it by calling it a policy, meaning that he didn't really have a border policy. And he said that Senator Bennett from Colorado went to an event in 2024 where Biden seemed non-functioning. He left the event thinking, this is why our border policy, our immigration policy was such a mess. So do you remember thinking, as I did, so you probably had the same thought, what is wrong with Biden? Like, why can't he close the border? Is it really just incompetence? And it turns out, according to Jake Tapper and according to Senator Bennett, it was literally incompetence. It was actual incompetence. Now, there were, of course, lots of people who wanted the border open, but Biden wasn't one of them. Biden wasn't an open border guy, but they still slipped it past the keeper and got their open border because he wasn't capable enough to stop them. I'm not even sure he knew what was going on. So I think that's the most brutal thing that we've seen, because it's such a direct claim that the monstrous problem we had with immigration was literally caused by Biden's brain not being functional, and by our news people not calling it out, and by Democrats lying about it. So every time you think this is going to go away, it just gets worse. And this might go on for a while. So if you're like me, you're watching the Democrats try to learn, and they're trying to learn, what was it we did wrong last time that cost us, losing everything? And it seems like the things they're trying to learn are from two books. One, the Jake Tapper book with Alex Thompson, Original Sin. And that basically says that Biden was incapable, and it was known to the insiders. And then there's the Ezra Klein book, I forget his co-worker or his co-writer, called Abundance. Now, abundance is basically, we got to get rid of all these regulations and obstacles to building anything, because we can't build anything in this country because there are too much blue tape, as Jamie Dimon would say. So in summary, if you take these two books together, the Original Sin and the Abundance book, the thing that the Democrats have learned is don't run incapable candidates with terrible policies. Yes, that would really help you. Don't do terrible policies managed by incapable leaders. That's pretty much the whole thing. Their backup plan to Biden was Kamala Harris. I mean, they weren't even trying to have capable people. And they didn't even seem to be trying to have policies that would make sense, like closing the border, and I could go on. But that's as far as they've gotten. And then Alex Thompson, the co-writer with Jake Tapper, He was on a podcast where Megan McArdle, who writes for the Washington Post, asked how legacy media can avoid running cover for Democratic presidents in the future, given its bias. Now, that's a pretty good question from the Washington Post. So Megan McArdle is acknowledging that the mainstream media is left-leaning, and she's saying, how could we avoid running cover for Democrat presidents in the future like they did with Biden? And Alex Thompson said, uh, I wish I had good answers. Maybe like one of the answers is, get down to DC more and touch the grass. So in other words, there's nothing that's going to change, and the Democrats are going to run cover for terrible leaders on the Democrat side, and it's just going to reproduce. So they will have more terrible leaders that they'll tell us are excellent until they've left the office, and then they'll say, let me write a book about how bad they really were. Meanwhile, Tim Walz, he's got some of the worst advice. I like him because he's so pathetic. His advice is that Democrats should be a little meaner. They should be meaner and go scorched earth against Trump. And he says the president is a wannabe dictator. Now, does that ring true? Is that what they needed? They got 2 books telling them exactly what they need. What they need is good leaders, not mentally incapable ones, and good policies. What does Tim Walz say? We need to be meaner. That's the worst advice I've ever heard. We need to be meaner because he's going to be a dictator. Oh my God, they're so lost. Meanwhile, in a new poll by, Breitbart was writing about this, Atlas Intel poll, it said that Pete Buttigieg got over 30% of Democrat voters for 2028 presidential election. What do you think about that? Do you think it's his beard? As soon as Pete Buttigieg grew a beard, his popularity doubled. Did anything else change? I'm not aware of anything else that changed. He just grew a beard. And I was looking at the beard and I thought, well, it's not the best beard, but it's sort of manly. It's sort of J.D. Vance-like. Maybe that's all it was. Maybe he just needed a beard, ironically. Anyway, Joy Reid announced that she's launching her own TV show on YouTube. And why is she putting her own show on YouTube? Well, in her words, people want trusted voices. Is she a trusted voice? Joy Reid? I wonder if she actually thinks that about herself. Or is that just something she says because it sounds good? I don't know. Anyway, the ex-White House spokesperson, Jen Psaki, her show on MSNBC is tanking in the ratings. So I guess that just went right to hell. So her ratings have plunged, according to Headline USA, to humiliating new lows. Well, I don't know where humiliating is, and she's bleeding viewers just 1 week after moving to the coveted PM slot, formerly held by Rachel Maddow. So MSNBC is falling apart. How many of you saw the video today of Cory Booker doing exactly the same salute that Elon Musk was accused of doing as a Nazi. So I won't do the whole salute, but it's where he touches his heart and then he extends his hand. And we went through weeks and weeks of, well, obviously that's a Nazi salute. And then Cory Booker does it. And Matt Von Swall gave us a list on X of all the entities that did not cover it as news. Now, don't you think that'd be news? If Cory Booker did a Nazi salute identical to the one that they're sure was a Nazi salute from Elon Musk, because they're sure it's a Nazi salute. They're not doubting that at all. So here are the entities that did not talk about it: New York Times, CNN, Washington Post, MSNBC, NPR, USA Today, Reuters, Axios, ABC News. And every one of those made a pretty big deal about it when it was Elon Musk. I'll tell you, if you ever believed that Elon Musk gave a Nazi salute, you're an idiot. You're just an idiot. There's no way that any smart person could believe that that happened in the real world. Anyway, summer vacation time, and apparently we're getting fewer, the U.S. is getting fewer tourists from Canada, UK, Germany, France, and the Netherlands. To which I say, I wonder if that means that the hotels will be empty, or will people just be coming from other places? And I also wonder how long that's going to last. Because that feels like sort of a 1-year situation, doesn't it? Like it doesn't feel like Canada will now permanently not travel to the United States. I think it's just the headlines. And as soon as we get some kind of tariff thing worked out, it'll be back to where it was. Well, the CEO of AI company Anthropic warns that AI could wipe out half of white-collar jobs, entry-level white-collar jobs in 5 years. Post-millennial is talking about this. And he says that most of them are unaware this is about to happen. But isn't the real question how many jobs AI will create? Is there really nobody who's creating jobs with AI? Nowhere. You know, I get that programmers are more efficient and blah, 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 blah. But it seems to me that if you took an ordinary person who has a certain set of skills and then you gave them AI, couldn't they just immediately jump into jobs that they were otherwise not capable of doing? There must be something that creates jobs where there were no jobs. So I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's our only hope, is that it creates more jobs than it takes. Tulsi Gabbard was on Fox, head of the DNI, and she said that China has made it very clear that they don't want war. And we've made it clear we don't want war. Now, I definitely believe that about China, because the only thing that could just totally destroy China would be a war. And same with the US. The only thing that could sort of totally destroy us would be a war. So it'd be the dumbest thing we ever did, especially with each other. But China doesn't need a war. China can just keep growing its economy until it dominates everything, which is a way smarter way to take over the world. So, no, I don't think China wants war. I think they want to be capable of war, just in case anybody takes a run at them. But no, I think that's the last thing they want. Speaking of China, according to John Hayward, Breitbart News, there's an EU report that finds that China is behind 80% of Russia's sanctions avoidance. Now, didn't we already know that? Didn't you assume that China was the one who was buying mostly energy, I assume, from Russia. And so those two are sort of attached at the hip. And doesn't that mean that Russia is basically China's bitch? Because if China is buying 80% of their oil, or probably their gas plus oil, doesn't that mean that China essentially controls Russia now? Because the whole reason we didn't like the Russian pipeline that got blown up is that we didn't want Europe to be dependent on mainly one source of energy. But it works the other way too. If you're the customer, if you're buying 80% of the energy from Russia, and energy is their main export, doesn't that really mean China can make them do just about anything they want? Seems that way to me. So I don't think that Putin's in a good position. Like he may be in a good position vis-a-vis Ukraine, but he's not in a good position in the world because China sort of owns his ass at this point. Seems like it. Anyway, Greta Thunberg is on a boat, and she's heading to Gaza, and so she's going to join the latest Gaza-bound Freedom Flotilla, and they're going to protest Israel's actions. Well, that should solve everything. It seems to me that Greta has done such a great job in other topics that if she can't end the war in Gaza, I don't know who can. So we'll see if she survives that. The Times of Israel is reporting that. Meanwhile, you will not be surprised to know that the latest push to get a deal with Hamas looks like it's not going to work out. As if it ever could. Steve Witkoff says Hamas's response to a Gaza ceasefire proposal is unacceptable. And, there's details, but of course, you don't even need to know the details. You just have to know that there really is no way that Hamas is going to make a deal. Because I think the Israelis are offering the following deal. If you surrender, we'll put you in jail forever or kill you. I don't think the Hamas fighters really have a second play. It's not like they're gonna, they're gonna find some new way to, I don't know, make a better life. The only way they're gonna stay alive is if they keep their hostages and they stay underground. As soon as they come above ground, things are not going to go well for them at all. So how could there possibly be a deal? I don't know how there could be. So, and I don't think they care about getting their own hostages back, so that's probably no big deal, even though there are lots of them. Anyway, and then there's some fake news that came out of Israel that said Israel opened fire on some civilian crowds. That appears to not be true, based on a video of the event. And in other news, Ukraine is ramping it up, and apparently they did a major drone hit on multiple Russian air bases. So they're just taking out the Russian planes on the ground. Now, that's not good, because if they can reach all of these bases, at least the bases that would be close enough to threaten Ukraine, are most of the airplanes just sort of sitting there on the airport tarmac? Because it looked like they could just destroy them at will if they were willing to go that deeply into Russia, which apparently they are. All right. So that's all I got for you today. There she is. And I'm going to say hi to the locals people privately. And the rest of you, thanks for joining. And come back tomorrow, same time, same place, where we'll have some more fun. Because on Sunday, especially, what else you got to watch? It's just me. All right, locals coming at you.